13 minutes to the hour, this is Paris Live PM. The Somali capital Mogadishu is in lockdown today as the country holds presidential elections. More than 20 candidates are vying for the top job in a vote that's been marred by deep-rooted allegations of corruption. These aren't your run-of-the-mill elections. They come after lengthy delays, and the Somali people themselves won't be voting. Instead, 275 members of parliament and 54 senators are casting their ballots amid tight security at Mogadishu airport. Somalia has suffered years of attacks by al-Shabaab insurgents and conflict led by its powerful warlords. Now the country is trying to put together its first fully functioning central government in 25 years. With us to discuss this is today's guest, Roland Marchal, a specialist on the politics of conflict in sub-Saharan Africa with the National Centre for Scientific Research at Sciences Po here in Paris. You're very welcome to the programme.
Thank you.
Now, Somalia is the most corrupt place on earth. That's according to the anti-corruption watchdog Transparency International. Today's presidential vote and the parliamentary elections that preceded today's vote have been described as some of the most fraudulent events in Somalia's political history. Is corruption inevitable?
Well, first we have to acknowledge that corruption is a fact of life even in the neighboring countries. So, and if I read newspapers in a country like France, I may have the feeling that we are not that far from this problem as well. Certainly, what has been happening over this election is highly debatable in many regards, but let us not forget that there might be similar, maybe not worse, what happened in 2012 when the first election or selections of the MP took place. So, then corruption itself, it has a broad meaning, and we should again try to analyze the different layers. Some are really crude corruption, you buy a vote. In many situations, actually, money was offered at the end of the process to reward everyone. Not only to reward those who supported the winner. So I'm just saying people wanted the crown politics, and if you use that tool to achieve the selection of the MPs, money has to change hands. This is something generic. Now, morally, you could argue. But certainly it's not possible in Somalia today or in Somaliland or to enforce crown politics without money.
Now we're talking about huge sums of money for vote buying here. This is a very expensive election in what's quite a poor country. Where is the money coming from? Sums like I think investigators in Somalia said that something like $20 million was sort of slushed around during the parliamentary elections 4 months ago. Where's this money coming from?
Well, the first thing is if elections in Somalia were only an issue of money, then there wouldn't have been 24 candidates for the presidency because many of those candidates haven't any significant amount of money to compete. Yet they are around and they are competing. And again, we have to be extremely careful, as in any political system. Corruption doesn't mean everything. The second aspect is, and the question you're asking is very important, where the money comes from. Well, the money comes from different sources. Of course, embezzlement of state money has been a national sport in all cabinets over the last 15 or 16 years in Somalia. Let us not forget it started in 2000 in Arta in Djibouti up to now. On the other side, many candidates got the support of big business people who could afford to pay a few hundred thousands, maybe even 1-2 millions, and then by numbers that means that you could reach actually an important amount of money. The question is, you don't buy everything. That's why suddenly, after months when we were listening that the current president would be the winner, today you see most observers are designing scenarios, 3 or 4 scenarios. So that shows that despite everything, these elections are highly competitive. And of course, you could say conservatively that the current president is richer than anybody else.
Who's looking like the favourite to win? I mean, does the incumbent president, Hassan Sheikh Mohammed, have the edge to win a second 5-year term?
I was in Mogadishu 10 days ago. You had the feeling that, yes, on paper he was the likely winner. Now there were, different dynamics at play. One was basically a kind of, let us get rid of those who ruled the state over the last years. So without discussing whether they are good or bad, we want new faces. And another dynamic, quite important in some sectors of the parliament, was the role played, the interference by some foreign governments, especially Ethiopia, that has been campaigning for Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud. So therefore, again, by opposition to, by nationalism, if I could use this term, you may have, segments of the parliament that allegedly would have cast their vote for the Hassan Mahmoud, but today, for the sake of opposing Ethiopia, may actually support someone else. So it's, as I said, it's quite fluid, and we got already the results of the first round. Let us be very careful and not believe that the elections is already cooked.
Now, just looking at the political process, it's very complicated. Let's try and break it down. Somalia's central government, it disintegrated back in 1991. Since then, we've seen clan-based warlords taking control. So we're talking about clans and sub-clans and I think sub-clans, the list goes on. These various tiers are now recognised as official political units. So can you explain to us just how powerful Somalia's clans are and exactly how they fit into the political system?
Let me go back to early 1990s. At that time, you journalists were basically focusing on different conflicts. One was the big war in Iraq, the Gulf War. Another one was a war in Liberia or Sierra Leone. And in those wars, what you witness is basically the collapse of the social fabric of the country, violence, amok violence. In Somalia, the situation was diverse. Not that people died in numbers, but the social fabric of the country resisted and allowed these people to rebuild some kind of social relations very early in the civil war. The civil war is about who is running the country. It's not about how I should deal with my neighbors. In other conflicts, such as Liberia, Sierra Leone, I took them because they started basically at the same time, the issue is what I should do with my neighbors. So in Somalia, then you had different layers. You had socially things actually recover fairly quickly compared to other conflicts. Economically, Somalia did actually quite good. Without any state or regulations on agreement with other neighboring states. But politically, it has still been, in the shambles, both because of the social structure, the clan issue you mentioned, but as well because the interference of regional states, because all the regional states wanted a state they could control. And of course, they got clients among the Somali political elites, but maybe not strong enough to convince everyone to join the project.
What is the great hope that Somalis and other countries in the region are hoping will come out of today's vote? Are they hoping to make the country stable enough to properly function as a democracy, or perhaps the clans don't want to see the status quo change because presumably the current system is beneficial to them?
Well, the current system is a safety net for a number of operators in the economic realm, in the political realm, even in the society at large. But of course, it has its advantages, but it has its cost. I think what people want is, of course, the end of the war with Shabab. And this is not a Somali issue, because the Somalis, they may have different views about how to address this conflict. But again, the war in Somalia is made by foreigners. AMISOM is made up of neighboring state contingents. The Americans, the French, the Brits have forces involved in that war. And so there is a need maybe to, I think many Somalis will share the view that we need peace with Shabab. Shabab are our sons. They are not foreigners. It's not the Islamic State as described by the Western press. They are our people, so we need to talk to them and see whether at one point we could enter into a negotiation. But first we need to talk to them, reconcile locally, because there are a lot of small parochial conflicts. All those issues have to be handled by the next president, maybe in a more efficient manner than the previous one.
Okay, now I've got one last question for you. We've only got about 20 seconds left. So just briefly on that subject of foreign interest in Somalia, given that these elections are essentially being funded by Western donors, do you think there's Somalia's international backers are feeling the pressure to show that progress is being made in the country?
Yes, certainly, indeed. At the same time, let us not be naive. We look Somalia today. It's a country in turmoil, still war in the main areas in the countryside. Now, if you try to project Somalia in 10, 15 years or 20 years, maybe Somalia will be an oil producer, a very, very significant one.
Our thanks there to Roland Marchal.